The European Commission has told the social media platform TikTok to change what it calls its addictive design. It's after a 2-year investigation found the TikTok app has features that keep users engaged for long periods, which the Commission says can harm the mental health of children and vulnerable adults. TikTok has strenuously denied the claims and says it will challenge the ruling.
The pushback against social media is intensifying in a number of European countries as well as in the United States and Australia. This morning, the European Commission said TikTok was designed to be addictive, with features such as autoplay and push notifications that encouraged users, including children, to keep scrolling to the point where their brains were on autopilot even during sleeping hours.
The measures that TikTok has in place are simply not enough. Screen time management and parental controls are not properly working on TikTok. TikTok did not properly assess how its addictive features can harm users, and they did not implement effective measures to mitigate such risks.
TikTok described the claim as categorically false and entirely meritless, saying it would challenge the finding with every means available. The company insisted there were inbuilt screen time limitations and rewards for those users who did not use the app at night time, adding there was no scientific consensus about harms caused by prolonged use. There were mixed views among some Dublin users.
It's just like kind of brain numbing. So the more you scroll, the less you kind of have to think about the things that you have to do and, your actual life. It's really easy to dissociate and escape.
I don't have a very hard time stopping. I've heard other people tell me that they can't stop for hours. So I think it also has to do kind of with your personality.
I would say it has an addictive nature. I'd say I usually spend maybe 2 to 3 hours on it per day.
Spain has just introduced a ban on social media for under 16s, while similar bans are under consideration in France, Denmark, Finland, Greece and the UK. Next week, a major test case gets underway in the United States, involving a number of social media and big tech firms. The case revolves around a 19-year-old who claims she developed suicidal thoughts at a young age, thanks to the attention-grabbing nature of social media apps. TikTok has a right to reply to the Commission case, which could drag on for several months. The Trump administration continues to castigate EU regulators, accusing Europe of censorship and targeting US firms. Tony Connolly, RTE News, Brussels.
Well, let's get more on this now from our work and technology correspondent, Brian O'Donovan. Brian, how significant is this?
I think this is really significant, Sharon, and it's different to what we've seen before. So look, in the past, you have regulators here and across Europe slapping a big fine for maybe the data breach or for not carrying out the risk assessment. A fine, by the way, which they won't pay the tech firm. They'll tie it up for years in courts because they'll appeal it. And then they get the rap on the knuckles and then we hope they correct the behaviour. This is different. This gets to the fundamental core of what these social media platforms rely on, and that is the algorithm. That is the systems that they've put in place to keep you engaged, to keep you on your phone, because the longer the eyeballs are on the screen, the better it is for them in terms of engagement, advertising, profit, and all of that kind of thing. This preliminary ruling looks at this and says, this is a problem, and we're not happy with the way this is designed. This is specifically to do with TikTok, but you can be sure that the other social media platforms are nervously looking at this because the EU is also looking at them and their systems to see if there are similar breaches in those cases. Now, TikTok would say, look, we are utterly in disagreement with this ruling. We will fight this to its core because we believe the EU is wrong here, and they point out the various safety features they've put in place. In general, social media companies will say, look, algorithms are a good thing because they curate the content, they actually ensure you're getting what you want to see, and in fact they can protect children and vulnerable people from more harmful content because they're on a curated platform. But for years, campaign groups have been saying, no, we need to tackle the algorithms, we need to take this seriously. We hadn't really seen regulators or legislators doing this in any big, meaningful way. So I think this is a very, very significant step that we're seeing. And it's interesting to pick up a point Tony made there about the US. This week in the US, we saw Republicans on Capitol Hill criticising Europe for censorship and for being too strict on US tech firms. If this becomes a wider EU system whereby they're going to go after the algorithms and go after these platforms in that very core way, I think we'll probably hear a lot from the US in terms of criticism over the coming weeks and months.
All right, work and technology correspondent Brian O'Donovan, thank you.
Returning now to our top story, we're joined in studio by Dr. Deirdre Robertson, who's Senior Research Officer with the ESRI. Thank you for joining us on 6-1. You've done a lot of research into this very topic. We're no longer talking now about just toxic content online, but also toxic design.
Yeah, so these kind of addictive features, as they're called, has been shown in the research a lot. So the idea of infinite scrolling and push to refresh and the kind of like features are all things that research has shown make people more compelled to use the apps and spend longer on them as well. And it's something that affects children, adolescents, and all of us, in fact, causing us to spend more time on them.
It is very tempting to stay on once you're on there. And as we said, these are being specifically designed now very often by psychologists to keep us scrolling.
Yeah, some people have actually likened them to like slot machines. The way that slot machines keep you engaged is by having unpredictable rewards. And essentially, it's the same types of features that are being used by companies like TikTok in order to keep people online, because you're constantly getting more content and then refreshing to get more and you're not sure what's coming up next.
We heard in our report there, and it's quite scary, that children are scrolling so much now that their brains are on autopilot even when they're asleep. How can scrolling for long periods affect the mental health of children and vulnerable adults?
So the effect of being on social media for a very long time, particularly for adolescents girls, is because of, for example, having a lack of sleep when people are online, or a lack of opportunities to do other things like face-to-face interactions with other people or other activities, but also then because people are more likely to be exposed to the types of toxic content that we know that children and adolescents are very likely to be exposed to on social media, like very misogynistic content or content about self-harm. And the more you're on these platforms, the more you're likely to be exposed to that as well.
It's all coming back onto parents now. There's so much peer pressure. You've got young kids, I've got young kids. They're all wanting to be on their devices constantly. Isn't it up to the social media apps now to work on this?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It can't all come down to parents. So we know that there are parental controls there that often companies will say, well, they're there and people can use them, but actually they're not very effective. They're very easy to get around, and they can actually cause friction in a household as well when parental controls are just relied on. So I think it certainly does need a kind of system level change to these features in order to protect people from the harms.
So what can we do? We're seeing countries like Australia and Spain banning social media apps. Is that the answer?
Well, it's kind of the answer to a different problem. So certainly, we don't know yet whether bans are likely to be effective or not. So we know with social media, there's a network effect where everybody is on it, which means that everybody isn't on it, then sure, people are less exposed to harm. But we don't know yet what the effects of those are. But if we just do the bans and don't then regulate for reducing these types of addictive features, then it means that adults are still, being exposed to these types of addictive features of social media content. And then adolescents, when they get to 17, 18, are on them as well. So I think we need to have multiple approaches where we're looking at the design as well as whether children should be using them or not.
And you mentioned earlier the parental controls, where people think, I have parental controls on my child's device, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, so the evidence suggests that they can become over-relied upon, and then they actually are very easy to get around. And then it means that parents, because they're relying on them, are less likely to talk to their children about what they're actually seeing online. And far more children, there's evidence in Ireland and other countries, have seen very extreme content than the parents actually realise, which means that if they're not then talking about that content, it can kind of, stay in their minds and cause harm and cause their kind of mental health difficulties that we're seeing associated with excessive social media use.
All right, Dr. Deirdre Robertson from the ESRI, thank you for joining us on 6-1 this evening.
Thank you.